Good morning. Yesterday I spent a whole day constructing a video about the places I've been by using a world map and pointing to it. And after I uploaded it, I found that the quality was completely rubbish. So I don't think I'm going to attempt that again. Again, it's early days in this process. I'm in a learning process. So today I would like to just talk you through the trips that I've done with a view to the fact that I might dig deeper into some countries, or I will dig deeper into some countries in up and coming videos, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what I've done, and then if you are interested in any of the places or have any particular questions about the trips, then I'm happy to help. So that's the purpose of today's video. So I'll use my iPad here to help guide me along, because there's been quite a few trips, but the first, and I'm talking about foreign trips here, outside of the UK. The first trip that I did was on a rented Triumph Bonneville in 2005, and I did a tour of Greece with a small tour group. Worked out really well, really enjoyed it. Beautiful back roads, the guy was very knowledgeable, and yeah, it whet my appetite for foreign travel. Now, between 2005 and 2010, I was working abroad and very busy and didn't manage to get away. And to be honest, I spent a lot of my biking time in the Highlands, because I was rediscovering that after not having been up there for quite a long while. But in 2010, I did my first kind of big tour on my own bike, and that was Boris, the BMW behind me. I bought him in August 2009, and then I think it was May 2010, I went to do a tour of the Alps. At that time there was a ferry sailing from Rosyth in Edinburgh, which was brilliant, to Zeebrugge. I think it lasted for about a year, and hopefully it's going to come back. And I met up with a friend or a workmate who was a BMW rider, and he was from Belgium, and he led me through Luxembourg, Germany, France, Switzerland, where we met another old friend of mine, Hutch, who was living in Zurich at the time, and we did our Alpine tour. So a brilliant experience all round. And that led us to another foreign tour, and that was a solo one the same year, 2010. Later on in the year I did a lap of Ireland, so I did a bit of the Republic of Ireland. And yeah, it was quite a short tour. I think it was about 5 days, but again, very enjoyable. The next tour was another one on rented bikes, and this time there was a bunch of us, friends from 30 years ago, all reconnected and met up in Phoenix, Arizona, and we hired our 1200 RTs, and we did a circuit where we went up North Arizona through the Grand Canyon, through Monument Valley, into New Mexico, down through Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and down as far as Truth and Consequences. I love that name. And then across the desert back to Phoenix. That was a really good trip. That one was with Hutch, who I mentioned earlier, Honda, who lived in Australia, Pup, who lived in England, Tree, who lives in Scotland, and Moose, who lives in Scotland. And it was a great experience. After that, I did my first proper, what I call it, motorcycle adventure tour, and that was in 2012, and I rode to the Nordkapp, the very northern point of mainland Europe in Norway. It's very popular with bikers and adventurers now. At that time it wasn't that well known. A workmate of my wife's told me about it, and we planned to go together, but he pulled out at the last moment. So basically I went solo, got the ferry from Newcastle across to Amsterdam, rode through Holland, Germany, up through Denmark, and took a ferry from the north of Denmark to Bergen, and then went up the Norwegian coast and stopped off, crossed over to the Lofoten Islands, which were amazing scenery wise, and then right up 300 miles above the Arctic Circle to the Nordkap. I think I only met one other foreign biker in that trip, and that was a French guy with his son in the back. I'd imagine there's just, it's teeming with foreign bikers now. I then come back down through Finland, Sweden, back into Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, and ferry home. That took me 2 weeks and 1 day, and I think it was over 5,000 miles. So there was a lot of long days, but it really whetted my appetite for more. In 2013, I did 2 trips again. The first one was called the Meet Halfway Tour, and that was with Big Honda, who was living in Sydney, and myself. We met in Cape Town, South Africa, and we rented a couple of knackered R1200 GS's, but they were functional, and did a lap of the garden route. Brilliant ride, and just great experience. My first time, and I started attempting a wee bit gnarly gravel roads, and I had no training, no idea, and shouldn't have been doing it, but I've got better over the years. I'm definitely not an expert, but I've got better. And then later on in that year, the boys who had met down in Phoenix met in San Francisco, and we did a Californian tour. So we went from San Francisco down Pacific Highway 1 a bit, and then crossed over to Yosemite National Park, and then headed towards Lake Tahoe and back to San Francisco. And those were done in rented 1600 6-cylinder BMWs, which performed magnificently. One of the best bikes I've ridden. If I was wanting a touring bike, then that would be high in the list. After that came the really big one, and that was the Argentina to Alaska trip. So it was Hutch, Honda and myself. We flew our bikes into Buenos Aires, rode down to the very southern tip of South America, which is Ushuaia and the island of Tierra del Fuego. And then we snaked our way up through, crossing the Andes several times, through Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, and then we got a ferry to get around the Darien Gap. We were very, very lucky because the ferry only ran for, I think, less than a year. Otherwise we'd have had to air freighted it or use some kind of rickety sailing boat. And then we went up through the Latin America countries and Mexico, into Mexico, through the States, through Canada and up into Alaska, right up to the Dalton Highway, and then made our way back down. So that was an epic trip. That was 4.5 months, and it was 23,000 miles, 23,500 miles to be more accurate. So yes. After the big trip there was a break in 2016 and a small trip to the Isle of Man Classic TT in 2017. But I still yearned for something big again, although I didn't have the time and money and well, I didn't want to leave my family for so long again. So I was trying to work out what I could do, and I come up with a split journey around the world. So in 2018 I started the part 1 of the journey. So I took a ferry across to Holland again, through Germany, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and then crossed into Russia. And in Moscow I met up with a tour group. It was a fairly new company called Russ Motor Tours, and I went with them in a kind of customised part. The tour group were heading from Moscow to Vladivostok, so the Trans-Siberian Highway, but I wanted to go through Mongolia. So basically I made a deal where I could ride with them to Novosibirsk in Siberia, and then I left the group and went through Mongolia on my own, and then continued to Vladivostok on my own. I didn't really want to travel with a group, but the benefit was, one, it helped me get used to Russia, but the main benefit was that the guy was going to arrange to freight my bike back from Vladivostok and the Trans-Siberian Railway to Moscow, and he would hold it there for me till I picked it up. So it worked out really well. Mongolia was a story in itself. It was a hard trip through Mongolia, but I'll cover that separately. And then in 2019, the following year, I shipped the bike over. Well, I returned that year, the same year that I did the Russia trip. I returned 3 weeks or 4 weeks later and rode my bike back from Moscow to the UK. And then in 2019, I shipped the bike to San Francisco and rode across the USA to Boston to complete my around the world trip. Now the plan was when I got to Boston, I'd leave the bike with an old workmate, stepmom, in her garage, and I would go the following spring and do something else with the bike to get maximum value out of the freight costs. I was going to probably do the Trans-Labrador Highway up in Canada, but COVID struck, and Boris was in Tracy's stepmom's garage, Kathy, for 2.5 years. So remotely for 2.5 years we kept Boris running, spinning his wheels, draining his fuel and putting fresh fuel in, changing the battery tender. I mean, Kathy and Tracy were just brilliant. But so after 2.5 years I was able to go back and get Boris, which coincided with the plans we had to potentially do a trip of Route 66. I was going to be doing it in theory in a car with my friends, Moose and Ted, but because Boris was there, then ultimately I got what I really wanted, and was to do Route 66 on a bike. So I went back after 2.5 years, fired Boris up, serviced him, and rode Route 66. Got to LA and then rode up to Vancouver and shipped him home. And absolutely brilliant. In 2023 I did 2 trips. The first one was early in the year, and I flew to Sydney, Australia, and met Raymond. He had 2 bikes, so I borrowed his Ducati Scrambler in stock form, and we rode down the Australian coast to the south and got a ferry over to Tasmania, and we did a lap of Tasmania, which was really good. We then get the ferry back and did a kind of separate, more inland route back up to Sydney. That was probably an 8-day trip. It was quite a lengthy trip in a Ducati Scrambler, but I really enjoyed it. And then towards the end of that year, the September of that year, I returned to the Alps with another 2 friends, Tree and Kenny. We rode actually down and took the Channel Tunnel, which was a first for me. Brilliant experience. Didn't like the M25. And rode in from France through Belgium and down into Germany, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. We did a lot of the passes, and then we also did the Stelvio Pass in Italy, and then returned home. Great riding, absolutely great riding. In 2024, I did a solo trip down to Morocco. So I rode down to Portsmouth, got the ferry across to Bilbao, took 2 days to ride down through Spain, so quite quickly, and over to Morocco and did a lap of Morocco, which took me back to being like in South Africa or Mongolia. It's got a real third world country feel at times. Not everywhere in Morocco, but good parts of it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Spent a week in the south of Spain with my wife before riding the bike back up home. And that brings us mainly up to date. I've got something planned. This is September. I've got something planned for this year, which I will reveal shortly. But I hope this was of interest to you. As I said, I'm not doing this to say I've been everywhere. I'm doing this to say if there are some of those places that you're interested in, if you've got any questions, then please let me know. And as I said earlier, I'll do some deeper dives into maybe some of the countries or areas, and probably the first one I'll do is the USA. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video, you want to hear some more about more of the countries, more of my rides, then please like and subscribe.